Hi there, welcome back. I just wanted to take a minute to thank you for listening. The first chunk of episodes that we did was just so much fun, and it has just been such an honor to help share these stories of grace and courage during difficult times. I also wanted to thank you for all of you who subscribed and rated and reviewed the podcast. We stayed about number 2 or 3 on the new and noteworthy list for the category that this podcast is in. And that's a huge deal. New listeners were able to find the podcast, and I'm just so grateful for all of your support. That said, if you haven't subscribed or reviewed or rated the podcast yet, please take a minute to do that, because it is how my ranking goes up, and it's how new listeners find stories of unfolding grace. So it really does make a difference when you subscribe, rate, and review, and also when you share with your friends, because that's the best way to find out about new and awesome things, is when we share. A couple things I wanted to say before we get into this episode. The first is that I think there's going to be a live show this summer, which is really exciting, and I'm really looking forward to the possibility of that. So if you're local or if you would like to travel, keep your ears and eyes open. The best way to keep track is probably to either follow me on Facebook at Becky L. McCoy or subscribe to the newsletter, which is in the show notes. Thanks again for encouraging me and cheering me on. Let's continue this adventure. I'm Becky L. McCoy, and you're listening to Stories of Unfolding Grace, the podcast about grace during unexpected times. You'll hear from real people dealing with hard stuff, and I hope you'll feel encouraged that you can bravely live through hard stuff too. This is episode 14, and I'm talking with my friend Catherine Dodd about how her childhood educational experiences really put her at a disadvantage for the rest of her life, but she overcame, and I'm really excited for you to hear her story. So I'm here with my friend Catherine. She is a fellow writer over at abeautifully.messylife.com, and why don't you share just a little bit about your life is kind of like mine in that we have many, many stories to choose from, and it's hard to pick just one. But
yes.
You picked this just one for your first episode because I've already told you you're going to have to come back.
Right.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about this particular season?
So, one of the things now in my season right now is that I'm a high school teacher. I'm an educator. And my story that led up to this point is really kind of long and involves a lot of different things. So I guess I'll just start at the beginning. As a kid, I was in and out of schools. I was in private schools, I was homeschooled, and I was in private school. And I was kind of raised in a very fundamentalist household wherein, there was sort of this idea that public school was really very, very worldly and, dangerous. So initially I started off like in a private Catholic school for first grade and part of second grade. And then, there was some doctrinal challenge that happened. And so I got pulled out of that school and then was homeschooled the rest of that year and then put in public school the next year. And I think I remember coming home and saying, something about what we were learning. And there was like, my mom was up in arms about kind of what was going on there. And so I was pulled out. And I think it was probably like 2 months into school. But, from then on, it was kind of in and out of homeschool, public school, and private school until I was a freshman in high school. And so I was in and out 9 different times at random points during the year. So it's not like I would start, school at a school and then finish the whole year there. There would be many times where I would, start homeschooling in the middle of a, semester or a quarter, get put into a private school or get taken out of a private school or put in a public school. So, what that set me up for was really inner chaos, to be honest. I didn't feel like I fit in anywhere. It was really hard for me to make friends as a kid. And, just having like the unpredictability of not knowing, where I would be at any given point in time also really set me up internally to sort of have, issues with control for sure. Because my environment was very unpredictable.
And you said that you didn't spend an entire school year in one place until, 8th grade or something like that?
So 5th grade, I did spend a whole year in a private school. It was a different private school. But that was one of the only full years that I had. And then 8th grade, yes, I spent a whole year in another private school. It was a different one. So...
Right. And then, so moment of shout out to our mutual friend, Kathleen. So Catherine and I met in a writer's group. And then I just happened to notice on Facebook that we had this mutual friend, Kathleen, who was like my saving grace in grad school and Catherine's saving grace in middle school. And just what an awesome person to have in common. So hi, Kathleen. Thank you for being our friend.
Kathleen and I were like attached to the hip. She was like this amazing, she was like a saving grace for me. I had no idea really how to be a friend just because socially I had not been able to make connections with people, with other kids, with other students long term. And so, I had neighborhood friends growing up, but they went to the local public school. And so, when I didn't go with them, I really kind of lost, I lost those connections, as a young kid. So, so making that friendship was really actually so awesome and very helpful for me going into high school because I didn't know, really socially how to be around other kids. So, so that was challenging for me. And I think for me though, because as a kid, that was my norm, I just kind of like went with it, and I did feel unsettled, but I didn't ever think, to question any of it. I just kind of went along with what was going on. And so, when I got into high school, I was like, probably, I don't know, I would have to guess I maybe had a full 5th or 6th grade education, simply because I was in and out all the time and never had any kind of consistency. And so when I got into school, I was like, what is this? Like, I have no idea what anyone's talking about. I didn't really have an educational foundation. And so my goal then, I decided, like within a month of being a freshman in high school, I decided this school thing, not so much. This isn't for me. So my focus needs to be like on my social life, because, that became important for me. I needed to fit in. And so my academics sort of took a back seat for sure, to becoming part of a group. And so I kind of worked double time on that and, kind of let my grades, do whatever. That was not my focus. And I struggled significantly. I remember being in, math classes, and I'm not a math person anyway, and just wanting to just, crawl in a closet. It just, nothing clicked. And so I just kind of, dismissed it. I dismissed my classes. So, so that was difficult for me because I felt, at the one hand, I felt like a significant failure academically, and then, and literally failed classes. And then, on the other side of it was, I started to feel good about myself and that I was building connections with, with my peers. So, but, in all of it, there was just still this sense of like loss and not knowing, really how to regain any kind of momentum, because I was so significantly behind the 8 ball with my education. So I think
how do you go from having like a 5th and 6th grade level entering high school, deciding that classes, you don't care, to now you teach AP classes in high school. Like what happened there?
So the irony of all of this is that I, and here's my dirty little secret. And I never really told anyone this. My husband knows, a couple of close friends of mine know. The irony is at my high school graduation, I walked across the stage with a 1.73 GPA. And literally vowed internally as I walked across and got my diploma by the skin of my teeth. I will never walk into a school ever again. And so I was like, it was a horrifying experience for me. It really was. Socially, I'd made a lot of friends and, got along with people, but it created a lot of shame for me. So here's what happened. So I grew up in a really big family. And so because I think part of my identity was never developed, that was sort of developed for me, that I graduated from high school with zero direction. So, of course, if you're from this big family, you have zero identity and no means for college. And anyway, I wasn't going to get in. So at that point I was getting married and having kids, that was probably like the next step. And so I did that very young. And, by the time I was 22, I had an 8-month-old and newborn twins. And so, that was sort of like who I was. I had grown up taking care of kids and not been a student. And that's what I knew how to do. I knew how to be a caretaker. And so, I was not afraid to have kids. But the funny thing happened, I sort of found myself in the midst of, oh my gosh, I have these, 3 little ones. And, I freaked out. I freaked out internally and started feeling like those same feelings that I had when I got into high school of, I don't know what I'm doing. I have no clue, really how to do any of this. And, that set off an eating disorder for me. I started binging and purging. I hid it from my husband. And I know, that was, looking back, I know now, having gotten therapy and, treatment for that was, I felt such a sense of lack of control and loss of identity that, that was just a way for me to cope, with some of those things. So long story short, I guess, a couple years later, my kids were all in school. So my twins had gone to first grade. And, I sort of felt this clearly from God, a voice sort of saying, hey, you should go to college. And I'm thinking, in my head, I'm having this inner dialogue, what is this? I have no idea where this is even coming from. No way.
Right. You promised yourself you would never go back into school.
Right. I was like, that's never happening. Okay. So forget it. So I pushed it away and, so it just kept coming back. And I was like, come on, seriously. And, my sister was getting her master in divinity at the time. And she was like, you should totally sign up. And so I did. And I thought, okay, this is fine because I have a 1.73 GPA on my transcript. So I totally am getting out of this. There's no way I'm getting in, And so, unbeknownst to me, they look at it differently when you come back to school as an untraditional student as an adult. And so, I got in. And so, that was hilarious because God kind of was like, yeah, you're going to do this because I sort of laid this path out for you. And I know you said no, but I said yes. So,
and you have no idea how good you're going to, how well you'll do and how good you'll be. And
right. And the thing about it is that, I was terrified. I was absolutely terrified. And so I think I put so much energy, into wanting to, do really well because I had not been a good student. I mean, I had failed classes. And so, I did do really well, but, I think this was a way that, God restored the years in a sense that, I had lost. And, I had felt so and I hate to use the word stupid, but I had felt stupid for so much
For
of my life.
sure. Totally.
Yeah, that I was shocked, when I got such good grades, because it didn't. I was like, wait, how can this be? I don't really understand this.
Right, because when you're 15, you just see, oh, I can't get good grades as I'm dumb. I'm not able to do this. Not
Right.
as I haven't been set up for success.
Mm-hmm. Yes. So you just hit the nail on the head for sure.
This is what happens when you get two high school teachers talking about.
Right. Well, so we know this now, right?
Yeah, totally.
But yeah, as an adolescent, I was just like, oh my gosh, you just can't get it together. And that's just who you are. And,
Yep.
Never once occurred to me that this might be, not me. So of course, but, so I graduated with my bachelor's degree in psychology, and then I immediately went to get my master's degree in teaching. So yeah, today I am a advanced placement psychology teacher. And yeah, the irony is that God likes to do funny things with our lives.
Yeah. So when you think back, what are some of, you've kind of dropped a couple in, but what are some of the different emotions that you experienced through, so like in, first grade to like just before high school, how did you feel then?
Oh gosh, looking back, I was completely lost. I think I was really sad a lot of the time. I felt lonely because I didn't have any connections really outside of my my siblings or my family, and so I was lonely a lot. But I didn't really process any of this until I was an adult.
Right.
So even realizing it as an adult, what had happened, I got really angry. I became really angry about the fact that, my childhood had been so, shaped by my education, and not just my academic abilities, but my identity and who I was. And I think that was so detrimental to just me developing an identity as an adult, as a young adult. Very difficult. And
so how about in high school, your high school years? You said you definitely struggled with your identity as someone who was not intelligent.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I just, like I said, for lack of a better word, I thought I was stupid. I thought, hey, I'm just one of those kids that doesn't get it. I can't be helped. I took like 2 remedial math classes. I mean, I was like, I'm one of these kids, and it was not for lack of caring. I had never been trained to be a student. And so,
Right.
learn how to be a student in school.
Yeah.
And so because I was never consistently in school, I didn't learn how to be a student. But I think far above all of that was when I did graduate with my master's, and I found myself sort of bouncing from sub-job to sub-job, because of the way that social studies positions were at the time. Like the market was just saturated. And so I kind of felt, when I was in school, okay, I've got this plan, I'm ready to go.
Yep.
I've got, control of this, and things are going to be fine. And, I'm going to graduate with my master's, and I'm going to get a job and get tenured and all these things. And, when it didn't happen, I was really angry with God. I thought, what is going on? I just was in school for almost 6 years, and, raising my kids and working really hard, and, trying to, secure a professional identity for myself. And when it didn't happen, I was so disappointed, and I was mad at God, and I really got to a place where I was feeling really broken and lost. And I remember, this is a couple years back, walking out of this school that I had just finished a maternity leave at, and I kind of I remember walking, literally the last day that I did this position, I walked out of this school and I went, what's going on, God? Like, what's next? I have nothing. And that was in December of that year. And a couple weeks later in January, I sort of felt this stirring to start writing. And I always knew, like, I knew how to write. The only thing this is the only class I did do well with in high school was English. I would like write papers in my lunch period, and turn them in and get A's. And, I thought that was just like totally normal. And, and then half the time I didn't, read the book. And so I didn't do well on the tests or anything. So, but
it balanced out.
Yeah. So when I had to write the papers though, I was like, hey, this is awesome. And I think my teachers were a little bit like, why are you doing so well on your writing? And, you don't do well on anything else. But so I kind of knew how to write, but I never had really ever considered, going into that field in any way, shape, or form. Because again, I had no sense of who I was.
Right.
So New Year's Day, I was reading an article on the Huffington Post by a man named Ryan Bell, who had decided that he was going to spend a year without God. He was going to live as best he could like an atheist for a year. And I thought, this is kind of interesting. Like, so I tweeted to him and I was like, I'm going to totally do the opposite of what you're doing, because I was really seeking at that time. And I really wanted to plunge into getting to know God better and what he had in store for me. So I started a blog, and that's when I started writing. And so God started to use some of the gifts that I had for writing, just, in a small way, for me. But I think even in the hardest times, and the lessons for me are this, is God always sort of gives the outcomes that we don't look for because they're so much better than what, those outcomes that we sort of like project in our minds as being, hey, this is what I want to have happen, and this is what I think is best. And one of my favorite quotes in life is an adventure or nothing. Helen Keller said that. And I think, when we think of adventure, we think of excitement and, adrenaline and the unknown and all that stuff. But really, adventure actually implies hazard.
Yeah.
And we kind of like delete that,
Yeah, we have this totally romanticized view of just sitting on the top of a mountain without the horrible, like, gut-wrenching hike it took to get there.
Right. The only thing of it's like after you have a baby, you're like, in the middle of labor, you're like, I'll never do this again.
Yeah.
And then you see a baby and you're like, I forgot everything. Let's do this again. So, but yeah, I think God leads us to these places, and, really in our pain, like we have to choose, how we're going to respond. And I think, when we ask ourselves, like, what's my purpose? What do you have for me, God? And because a lot of that was me at that time. It was like, what is this? What do you want me to know about myself? What do you want me to learn? Who am I?
Right.
What am I supposed to be doing? If you didn't
develop that as an adolescent,
right,
then you have to figure it out at some point.
Right. And I thought I had created this whole, like, okay, I have this plan, and I'm going to school, and I'm going to teach, and I've got my master's. And, when it didn't happen for me, I was like, I just am upset. I'm really angry with you, God. And, I think in the end, I had to make a choice about how I was going to respond to my pain. And at first like I said, I was mad at God, and, I was constantly questioning, like, why are these things happening? And I think God wanted me in that process to ironically say, hey, you know what? You're at the end of 2 degrees. You got, you graduated both degrees with honors, and that is not your identity, nor is your identity, the kid who was failing all those years. And so it's neither. It's neither. Like, you are who I created you to be. I'm going to restore those years, but I'm going to choose to purpose your life in a way that I want to purpose your life. And it's not going to look like what you think, you planned it out to be. It's unsteady. It's unpredictable. And I definitely, again, was set up to control those things. And so when I did that plan for myself, that was part of that, control issues. I remember what it was like to, have that sense of instability and have that sense of unpredictability and not knowing when, my environment was going to change.
I get so excited to see people choosing to live bravely and authentically. Each week on Tuesdays and Fridays, I host a Facebook Live event to share more stories of people living bravely, and I want to hear your story too. Join us at facebook.com/Becky L. McCoy. I can only share so much with you here on the podcast, but you can read my story and learn more about living bravely and authentically at my blog, BeckyLMcCoy.com. Stop by and sign up to receive my monthly newsletter. It includes book recommendations and blog posts and podcast episodes you may have missed. Check the show notes for details.
This is what I've learned. In the process of being angry with God, God showed me those things. And again, this beautiful thing of me writing came out of it. And this beautiful thing of me teaching this subject, which ultimately taught me so much about who I am, ironically. What I learned and what God taught me, I think, is that he said to me, Catherine, like, your life will never be linear. Your life will never be linear. And
I hate that because, I studied physics. I want things to be linear and fit into perfect equations so badly. Like, that is my life's mission, to make it linear.
Right. And you know what? The funny thing is that, this is a science teacher, right? Is that God created this amazing universe, and there's all these like perfect mathematical, like structured things that run our world, right?
Yes.
But yet, like, here's where our meaning comes from, is this messy, like, squiggly line type living that he really makes the meaning out of. And so I think, like, we actually have to become the ones who are experts in, I kind of like that analogy that you used of climbing the mountain, because here's what happens. We have to become experts in doing things like that, in mountain climbing, in deep sea diving, in canyoneering, and all these like spelunking or marathoning or whatever it is, right?
All of it.
Right, all of it. And it changes as we live. And I think that's what God wants us to do. He's like, okay, I'm gonna redeem, I'm gonna redeem these things. And I want you to trust me. And even if it's messy or looks impossible, because I was all, being all about, like, I like things nice and neat and in a box, because that's like what, gave me some internal peace. Yeah. But God's like, I think you need to have that peace with me in the middle of that mess. And that's what, really came out of it for me, was letting go of that anger about really God not doing anything to me, or not creating a life for me that was, perfect and structured and all these different things. Is that I learned in this time that the mess really is where the beauty comes from. And is difficult. If I could go back and change some things, would I? Yeah, I would. It's not like I would say, hey, you know what? I think it would be wonderful, to relive those years,
right.
being a failing student. I would never want that for anyone. But I think what God does is that he turns the tide for us in our spirits, and in our hearts, when we're willing to go, okay, God, I have no idea. Like, I got to a place where I was like, I have zero idea what you're actually doing with my life. And so, like, then that's when God can actually do the work with us, is when we 100% surrender in those places. And so, like, our struggle actually ceases to be struggle when we start to find meaning in what he's doing with our path. And so,
yeah, it's so true.
mm-hmm.
So at the end of all of this, all the ups and downs and squiggly, what did you say? You said squiggly line type living, because I had to write that down.
Yeah.
It's so good. How do you see yourself living bravely and authentically?
Living bravely and authentically is leaning into some of the discomfort that I still feel about, number one, my writing. So now that I've got this, I'm a teacher. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm a teacher, and that it's not just a 9 to 5 thing. Like when you're a teacher, you have a teacher's heart. And so that's, you live it. And so living bravely means, walking into school and being vulnerable with my students, when appropriate. But also, I think something awesome that's come out of this is because I've embraced my ability to write and to be a writer, that I am definitely more encouraging to my students to seek after those things that they are gifted in, and encourage them to do that. And so
that's great.
Yeah. And so living bravely and authentically means letting God steer me in the direction he wants me to go.
Yeah.
Using my words and my voice to help others who have struggled with similar things, and inspire my students to walk their path the way that they were created to walk it.
That's awesome. They're some lucky kids.
They're awesome.
How would you encourage a student who is having some of those same identity issues and thinking that they're just not good enough? And how would you encourage an adult who really hasn't developed their identity and doesn't know who they are or what their purpose is?
So I think with kids, we have kind of like a two-edged sword. So we have kids that are looking to find out who they are. So they're trying on different roles and trying to figure out who they are anyway in high school. But then, I think we live in such a sociocultural climate that kids are confused about who they are based upon, their social identities on Twitter or Snapchat or, all these different things. And so they've got all this other pressure to be, a certain way.
And these curated lives online.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. They live in these digital platforms. And so I think I have had so many conversations with students who really are thinking, towards the end of their high school career, like, what is it that I actually want to do? And when I sit down with them and say, what drives your passion? What is something that you get excited about? And so, some kids will say, art, or I'm excited about helping other people. I'm excited about this. And that's where I say, find what you love to do.
Go with it. Yeah.
Go with it. I think we're so scared, because we kind of grow up with, you've got to make money. And, for some reason, like in our minds, we sort of think we have to bring home a paycheck, but it means that we can't actually do something that we love. And so that's how I encourage kids and my students. And also to be who they are, not to hide this for fear of what other people will think. I think for adults, it's a little bit different. I think, I kind of, when I turned 40, I kind of had a midlife crisis-y thing because I had kids so young. I'm stepping into empty nesting at this point. I've got, a 21-year-old and I've got two 19-year-olds. And so my life looks really different than other, 40 plus people. And so I think when we get to a place where we say, okay, who am I? Or what is it that God wants me to do? I've listened to so many people say, the importance is in the mundane things and the little things. I think when we seek God and we ask him to really show us where he wants us to use our areas of giftedness, where he wants us to use our voices, where he wants us to make an impact, when we're asking him those things, he's going to show us. And, there are times when we're going to feel like, oh gosh, I'm just not, I'm not making it, or I don't feel like I'm putting a dent in the world today. And that's okay. Sometimes God wants us to be in places where we are kind of not knowing exactly what we're supposed to be doing, because those are the times where he grows us the most. And I think if we can stay in those places of sort of, he uses those places of wandering to show us, my path looks different than yours. Mm-hmm. And, your ways are not my ways, and my thoughts are not your thoughts. Yeah. And so it just sort of changes us if we're willing to be, if we're willing to be changed, and we're willing to be transformed and say, okay, God, I know you planted these gifts in me. I know you want me to share you with the world. Show me how you want me to do it. Yeah. And so if we allow him to do those things, if we allow him to shape us and to lead us, then he will. He will. Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your heart, because, struggling with identity and purpose, that's kind of like a human thing to begin with. Yeah. But then there are just so many high schoolers and so many young adults who just are directionless, like you said. And I know that your story will be a huge encouragement to them.
Thanks so much for having me, Becky.
Yeah. Well, before we go, I have 4 fun questions for you.
Okay, good.
All right, so here we go. The first one is, what are you loving right now?
Oh my gosh. So I am like a podcast addict.
Awesome.
So I've listened to podcasts for a really long time, actually. When my kids were little, I used to listen to, back in the day we had cassette tapes, so they were kind of like podcasts. But
yeah. So yeah, I remember ordering whatever episode of whatever radio show. Yeah.
Totally. So I've always done that. But now I'm like addicted to I love the happy hour.
Yes. She's coming. Oh, Jamie Ivey's going to be on this podcast.
Oh, sweet. Oh my
gosh. I know.
Awesome.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, she is amazing. I have a little bit of a crush on her.
Oh, totally.
So, and then some others. I just started listening to Rob Bell, and so he's super interesting. But I listen to just a bunch, so I'm loving podcasts, and they make I do a little bit of I used to totally just do worship in the car. It was me and God. On the way to school, and now I'm okay, I'm worshiping, and now I need a little bit of podcasting. Yeah. So I'm doing that on the way to school too, just to kind of get my, my mind turning. Yeah. Which is really good too. So
totally
loving
that's how my house
right
gets
now.
Clean is podcasts.
Yes.
Okay. What's your favorite meal or snack or other food item?
Okay. So I am a vegetarian. So I've been a vegetarian for 18 years. So anything that's I'm really into roasted vegetables right now.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Okay. So here's dinner for you then. Quinoa with roasted vegetables, and then you put Greek yogurt, hummus, and a tiny bit of Asiago cheese on top. The best meal in the whole world.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I make a huge pot of it, and then you just eat off of it all week. It's so good.
Oh, I love it. And I love quinoa. Super high in protein. Good for vegetarians.
Yes.
But yeah, anything I can drizzle extra virgin olive oil on and just toss in the oven and then eat. That's my world right now. So
awesome.
Delish.
Yes, that is amazing. What are you doing to take care of yourself?
And coffee all day.
Oh, coffee.
Yeah, let's not forget about the magic beans.
Yeah.
What am I doing to take care of myself? You know what? That is such a good question. In the last year, my first year of teaching, I actually had a full-time teaching job. And I literally worked myself into the ground. I was working 90 hours a week and I never slept. And so the last year, I have been so diligent about getting at least 7 hours of sleep as best I can every night. And it has made a huge difference. Just in the way that I function on a day-to-day basis, and I think a lot of times, we allow our culture to tell us that, we should be machines 24/7.
Right. Busier is better.
Right. Yeah. If you are productive 24/7, there's some sort of pedestal that you get put on. And, sleep is sort of seen as weakness. And I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to do this anymore.
Yeah,
So
no.
taking care of myself looks like I'm sleeping 7 to 8 hours a night. Done.
Yep. Awesome. And the last thing is, what are you doing to be brave?
Oh gosh, you know what? I am asking God to show me what He wants me to do with my writing. That's my bravery for right now.
That's scary.
And raising, and and asking Him how He wants me to, share my voice through my writing, especially in some experiences that I've had as a parent of teenagers specifically. So I. Woo! I am just asking God to lead me in that direction, and asking Him to give me the faith to be brave when He says, you need to step out and do this.
Yeah.
So that's being brave right now.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm so glad that people get to hear your story, and definitely head over to Catherine's blog. It'll be in the show notes. Yeah. Thank you. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts. While you're there, please rate, review, and share Stories of Unfolding Grace. When you give it 5 stars, it goes a huge way in helping other people find the podcasts by increasing my ranking. If you're interested in sharing your own story of unfolding grace, head to my blog, beckylmccoy.com/submissions. I can't wait to hear from you. Next week on Stories of Unfolding Grace, I'll be talking with Monica Green about her son Mason's battle with brain cancer and how she helped her other children grieve after he passed away.
That's a tough one, trying to move through your own grief, breathe through your own pain and your own questions, and then trying to make sure your kids are moving through theirs as well. Everyone handles it so differently.
Joining me. I'm looking forward to next week.